So yesterday, we talked about the manifestation of nationalism in China and Japan. And we have to cut that lesson, lesson 14 in two, because the next portion, which is Southeast Asia, contains a lot of countries to discuss. So for today, we will continue that lesson. So the nationalism in Southeast Asia. So we're about to mention actually a lot of famous names in those said countries, okay, that you will not actually see anymore. Now, after we discuss them today in Asian history, next year when you're grade 8 in world history, they will not be mentioned. Okay, maybe Ho Chi Minh and that only. Pero the other individuals, they will not be mentioned. So please tune in this lesson because this is your like one time big time shot of really understanding them in a basic manner. Pero if you're the type of person na, no, I really love history, I want to search more. Of course, sources are available on YouTube. Pero kumbaga, if you're just gonna rely on what I will be teaching you, this is a rare topic. Rare topic. Okay, so let's have now this usual thing that we do. So before we discuss, I let you see the location of that said place. So since we are discussing Southeast Asia, this is the Southeast Asian region. Okay. So the people in Southeast Asia actually really look the same, or not really the same, but with a Malay race appearance. So the skin is brown, and then some of them with chinky eyes, others with very circular eyes. Ayan. Pero with regards to the skin tone, yan. That is something that the people in Southeast Asia really have in common. Kasi we don't have the same skin tone with Koreans and also Japanese and Chinese. East Asia kasi yun. Now in Southeast Asia, it's the skin tone that we find somehow commonality. Okay, skin tone, and then a portion of our language, yun, almost the same, especially in Indonesia. Philippines and Indonesia have the same tone in speaking and also the syllabication. They actually have the word salamat as well in their language, so things like that. So there's commonality in Southeast Asia. So we will be discussing today Philippines, and then Indonesia, Vietnam, yan. Indonesia, Vietnam, Indonesia. Ay, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, yan. Ayun, Myanmar. Myanmar. Okay, so let's start first with, of course, our very own country, Philippines. So you were fresh from grade 6, and I am aware that your social studies in grade 6 is the Philippine history. I'm not sure if it is called Hekasi pa rin. During our year kasi, when I was elementary, Hekasi yung tawag. But I think not anymore, no? What do you call your social science in grade 6? Can anyone remember? Kasi in high school, social science. I'm not sure what do you call it in English. In grade 6. Ah, naalala niyo pa? Hindi na. Yes, Roa, what do you call your SS in grade 6?
Araling panlipunan po.
Araling panlipunan. I think there are other terms pa. How about those students who studied in different school? Yes, Mary and Bettina. Mary muna. Sige, Mary.
Civica po.
Yon, Civica. How about with you, Bettina? And Adia later. Bettina,
I
Civica
was
din ba?
grade 1 to grade 3 po. We call it Hekasi I was grade 4 to grade 6, we already call it ano po, AP po.
AP,
Same
Araling.
as Pinagalawa po.
Oh, how about Adia? How do you call your
Same
SS?
for me po, Araling Panlipunan.
Yun kasi you see every school have a different somehow tone of phrase with their social studies. So yun, Civica, I was actually surprised na Civica, Hekasi, tsaka Araling Panlipunan. But all of that, definitely, iniba-iba lang nila yung term. Pero you always talk about Philippine history, right? I believe they rarely touch Asian history. Parang puro Philippines. So that's why when you're grade 7 now, we rarely discuss Philippines, and only in this portion Philippines was mentioned. That's why I am expecting na when I state some of the events in here, you know about them. Okay, like the first scenario first, di ba? So you're familiar that Philippines has been colonized by Spain for 333 years. So no wonder why our culture resembles Spaniards as well. Our Tagalog or the Filipino language that we have a Spanish translation, di ba? And also the food that we eat have a Spanish influence. So since then, um, Spain is actually very known to our culture. So there was this time in 1821 wherein the opening of the Suez Canal in Egypt happened. So if you have your map with you, you'll see that that Suez Canal somehow became a huge help in opening the Asian region, because the people in Europe no longer have to pass through Atlantic Ocean, tas bababa pa sila sa Asia, sa Indian Ocean, and then going to towards Singapore, Indonesia, and then tsaka lang makakapunta with the Philippines. So long traveling time. But with the opening of the Suez Canal, pwede na silang dumiretso sa Mediterranean Sea, Suez Canal, Red Sea, Indian Ocean, and then going to Indonesia, and then near na sa Philippines. So, yun. So, as you notice, I don't have map with me. So, I just know that by heart. So, I hope you know the world map as well by heart. Kasi very important yan. So, anyway, when the Suez Canal was open, the Filipino Ilustrados or yung mga intellectuals, parang young Filipino intellectuals who have money to go abroad, especially in Spain and in some parts of Europe. Doon kasi sila nag-aral. The people like Jose Rizal, Juan Luna, yun, those national heroes or Philippine heroes had the money and the influence to go there. Now that this Suez Canal was open in 1821, they have the opportunity to easily go back to Philippines. Hindi na malayo ang biyahe. And it's easy access, kumbaga. So basically, that started the idea of those ilustrados sharing what they learned in Europe. So what they learned by in Europe, it's the idea of revolution, the idea of fighting for your independence. The same way with what happened with the previous countries that we discussed. Their leaders like in the Meiji Emperor, tapos sila Mao Zedong, 'di ba? They somehow learn European ideas of democracy. And then they share it to their people. So that's what our heroes did. Okay, so this is the age of the enlightenment of the Filipinos. When those ilustrados share what they learn, those ilustrados kasi either wrote an essay, wrote an article, wrote a novel like with Jose Rizal, the Filipino minds were open. Na parang, we are being treated badly and there's a way out. There's independence waiting for us. So also in that age of enlightenment of the Filipinos, they learn about the prelocracy, meaning to say this is government of the priest. So for a long period of time in the Philippines, it's the priest under the Catholic Church who's like dictating what are the do's and don'ts of the nation. So tendency, have you read, kasi bata pa kayo for sure, Florante at Laura pa lang. Or Ibong Adarna, I believe you're Filipino. So when you're grade 8, it would be Florante at Laura. Pero I'm so excited for you to read when you're grade 9 and grade 10, the Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo. Because in those stories, you will really appreciate the creativity and talent of Dr. Jose Rizal, because he was actually able to write a story that depict or somehow show the same experiences that the Filipino people are experiencing during that time, and that is the abuse of the Spaniards. Okay, so with that novel of Dr. Jose Rizal, he inspires so many Filipinos to fight for freedom, na for us not to be governed by the Spaniards. And one of those Filipino who was actually very influenced by the writing of Jose Rizal is Andres Bonifacio. it's actually a wrong connotation when people think na si Jose Rizal, the smart one. Tapos si Andres Bonifacio, brute, yung parang laban lang ng laban and then not as smart as Jose Rizal. That's actually a wrong connotation because actually Andres Bonifacio is a smart man. And it's just sad that whenever he is being painted, ang hawak niya is gulok or like this ano parang short sword of the Filipinos, 'di ba? Which is actually a wrong connotation. Hindi naman siya gumamit ng gano'n. Baril actually, may baril na nung panahon na 'yun. Wrong connotation 'yun. And then plus, hindi siya gano'n ka-violent the way he is being depicted in the historical books. So nagbabasa siya. He's actually an intellectual as well. It's just like when he fights, he really fight with his all his body. Unlike with Jose Rizal, he fight using his mind, by using his principles. Yan. So yan, to further inform, yan, the end of the Spanish era actually happened with the help of the Americans. That's why we Filipinos, we have that soft spot with the Americans. Again, if you have your lolo and lola with you, if you could actually talk with them, for sure they always praise the Americans. Do they? Do they? Kasi yung last time I asked you what your relatives opinion about Japanese. We have the same parang experiences. My relatives also who were actually able to live during Japanese occupation, they do not like the Japanese. And then they lean towards a closer liking to the Americans. It has two reasons. First is like the Americans helped the Filipinos to eliminate the Spanish government and also the Japanese occupation. Kaya parang ang tingin sa mga Americans, superhero. Okay? So yan. So in the 1898, the Spanish-American War exploded when the sinking of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor in Cuba by the Spanish fleet. So what happened in here? The Spaniards attacked a ship owned by USA and it angered USA. So they had this war. So to cut the story short, the Spanish-American War, it was won by America. So when America won over Spain, they actually even helped the group of Aguinaldo to come back to Philippines because actually Aguinaldo left, okay, during that time. And then when he returned, he had the support of the Americans. So with that support of the Americans, Aguinaldo and his men had taken control of Luzon. So meaning they were victorious. They defeated many Spanish groups. But there was this one group of Spaniards who stayed in the Intramuros, the walled city of Intramuros. So imagine all of Luzon already been captured by Aguinaldo. So parang ready na. The Philippines is already okay of Spanish liberation. But there's this one portion of Philippines which is in Intramuros wherein the Spaniards are there. So basically, they cannot control all of Intramuros. They cannot penetrate Intramuros. So what Aguinaldo did, he declared the independence of the Philippines in his own native land, Kawit Cavite. Okay, so sa Kawit Cavite siya nag-declare that Philippines is already a victorious nation. We have our own independence. Okay, kaya yung image of Aguinaldo waving the Philippine flag in his balcony, yon, it happened in Kawit Cavite. Okay, so he was able to be successful with the help of the Americans. But this is what really shocking during that time. After the end of Spanish-American War, they had this Treaty of Paris. Okay, so in the Treaty of Paris, the Americans forced the Spaniards to hand over Philippines to USA in exchange of $20 million. So aside from getting the Philippines and Guam, nanghingi pa ng $20 million ang Spain na parang bayaran nyo na lang kami $20 million and we'll really gonna give you Philippines. So how does that make you feel as Filipino? Diba parang we were sold. Diba parang we were somehow our worth is $20 million during that time. So basically, nakaka-offend yun. Okay? Very offensive that dealings between America and Spain during that time. So that actually resulted to parang that hidden parang mistrust of the Filipinos to the Americans that we thought you help us to be independent. But somehow as time passes by, the Filipino leaders realize that the Americans are not there to actually liberate, but they're there to somehow colonize, but in a lighter approach, parang to influence. Ganon. So there's this war that ignited between Filipinos and Americans. But this actually started in a very, diba, misunderstanding eh. Kasi there's this three soldiers who are like walking in the night, and then it just so happened they passed through a checkpoint of Americans during that time. It's evening, and then the Americans were like telling the Filipino soldiers as they're walking, parang halt, halt. So what's the meaning of halt? 'Di ba, stop? Kaso some Filipinos have no idea what's the meaning of halt. So they still continue walking. So parang the Americans are like saying halt, halt. And then those Filipinos continue to walk still. So no choice, the Americans they actually fire, and they had an exchange. So the result of that, a war broke out between the two group. Kasi three Filipino soldiers were killed by Americans. So yun, dun siya nagsimula parang sa misunderstanding. And then subsequently, there was a war between the two nation. Pero this war is actually just ano lang naman, a quick war, but still it's a war that is brewing to happen. Kasi nga may mga negative emotion created by the Treaty of Paris. Okay? So yung moments lang na yun between the three soldiers and those American soldiers ignited the war. So this war lasted for 3 years. And then, so Philippines knew that after 10 years of transition period of the Philippine Commonwealth government headed by President Manuel L. Quezon, independence would be given to the Americans, by the Americans rather. Unfortunately, kasi they're expecting already na Americans are just training the Philippines to stand on its own feet. And then after that, they believe peace will happen. Kaso nga, always perfect timing talaga the Japanese eh. Remember with yesterday's topic, China? In China, like there's this civil war against nationalists and communists. Then came Japan, so they were able to be controlled. The same here in the Philippines, as Philippines and US are starting to have a good relationship, then came Japan naman. Ayun. That occurrences is in World War II. So in June 16, Jones Act was passed. This is to assure that Philippines will actually have its independence soon. They are just being prepared. And then in the Tidings Macdapi Act, yun na yun, the self-government of the Philippines is already been somehow passed. I'm having hard time speaking. Yeah. So anyway, and 1939 to 1945, the World War II happened, and the Philippines had its full independence somehow got delayed kasi nga war is happening. Yan, in 1946, in the Treaty of Manila, when the government of the US and Republic of the Philippines provided for the recognition of the independence of the Republic of the Philippines. So finally, 1946, year after World War II, Philippines gained its pure independence. And I believe up until now, we have that independence naman. It's just that we are always being influenced by other countries, especially USA. Parang what USA wants us to do, most of our government officials follow that. Okay. Now, next is Myanmar, or formerly known as Burma. I think now Myanmar, sobrang alam nyo to if you're pala TikTok. If you're always visiting TikTok, siguro nakikita nyo yung story or situations in Myanmar. Later, we'll tackle that. Pero I hope you know Myanmar. Okay, so Myanmar, it was governed as a province of India in its beginning. So parang it is considered as a province of India the same way with Bangladesh and Pakistan. And then, however, same with Bangladesh and Pakistan, they wanted to be a separate state. So in the Burma Act, it was passed by the British that further instituted the Constitution of Burma. So parang the Burma Act is like the beginning of Burma independence. So the Burmese nationalism grew, demanding independence for the country. And the Young Man's Buddhist Association, it's its very first nationalist movement. Ah, parang ano to typographical error. So I believe it's the young Bud no no no. I cannot determine what I type in here. Maybe I'm so sleepy na. Pero yun, those Buddhists, the Young Man's Buddhist Association, somehow they want to eradicate the Western influence, meaning to say they don't want the British people influencing them. Kasi 'di ba it's obvious what happened with India. British is like really hands-on with India. It's viewed as jewel in the crown. Thus here, Burma do not want that to happen to them. So there's this group also created, Dobay Maasioni or We Burman. All members in this group are actually called Takin or Masters. So this group are the ones that are really pushing for Burmese independence. So the nation gained its independence 1947, 2 years after World War II. And its very first prime minister is Takin Nu, um, and this is him. Yan, he looks very Filipino, no? Mga people in Myanmar really resembles like Filipinos. So that's Takin No. And then followed by this is Ong Suchi. Later I'll not Suchi pala the daughter. Later I'll show you his complete name. Pero this man right here, he is the father of the present Prime Minister of Myanmar, which is a woman. She's already 63 years old eh. That woman in Myanmar now is actually in prison. Okay, she's the reason why there's chaos happening now in Myanmar kasi she was imprisoned after she won the election. Tapos nagkaroon ng coup d'etat, the military took over Myanmar right now. So yun yung parang his daughter is like a massive part of history. The same way that he is. Kasi he's part of the Burmese independence. He's one of those people who fought for their independence. This is the leader after him. So, ayan. Ayan. Ung San, yun. Kasi his name Ung San, and then the daughter is Ung San Suu Kyi. Okay, so this is Ung San Suu Kyi. Yan. She's known to be a pro-democracy type of leader of Myanmar. Yan. And then he fought against the former socialist leader, General Ne Win. So this is Ne Win. Yan. So spent more than 15 years in under full watch, or she was actually house arrested. Even long before that she was arrested now, she's always being targeted by the military of Myanmar. Okay, so most of it is under house arrest. She's actually viewed as a hero now. She's still alive pa naman. Pero yung niya ba, yung symbol niya to Myanmar is like the symbol of Cory Aquino in the Philippines. And parang she is viewed as someone who really fought for the freedom, democracy of Myanmar. So yan, to prevent her from meeting party supporters and international visitor, she was actually house arrested kasi they don't want her to gain so much influence. Yan. This is what's happening now to Myanmar because since they embrace democracy in her leadership. She ran again kasi last year. Tapos the election result last November showed that she's the winner. Okay? Ayan, sige, good question na. Why she is compared to Cory Aquino? I'll answer that later. Good question, Bettina. Roa. So, yan wala. Allow me to show this to you kasi she gained so much popularity with the democracy approach that she has in Myanmar. Kasi in that corner of Asia, puro yan communist eh. So China communist, Vietnam communist, eh katabi lang nila Myanmar is not communist but rather democratic. However, kahit democratic yung nation of Myanmar, the military force of Myanmar wanted communism. Okay, they wanted communism. So when Aung San Suu Kyi won again as prime minister last November lang, November 2020, nag-election sila even pandemic eh. And then the result, she won, and then the military do not accept it. The people accept it kasi they voted eh. But the military, they actually joined forces and ousted Aung San Suu Kyi and then have her in prison. So nakakulong siya sa bahay niya. And then now, the ones governing Myanmar are the military leaders. Tapos what they're doing is like whenever there are protests, they're like somehow shooting them down. Parang ayaw nila ng may protest. Because these protesters are like fighting that Aung San Suu Kyi is the winner and the rightful prime minister. But the military during that time, or during now, do not support that. Kasi nga, this is a nation that is somehow divided. Most of military wanted communism. Meanwhile, commoners wanted democracy. So here's another image of that. So this is the military general that somehow had the coup attempt now, ay the coup d'etat now. Yan. So as you see, naka-face mask sila. Kasi this is just recent images, okay, from Myanmar. Now this is actually a very ano sad situation. I'm not sure if nakikita nyo to sa TikTok. Hindi ako pala TikTok ha. Just to just to inform you. You might be thinking, "Lo, si teacher puro source TikTok." Hindi kasi lumalabas siya sa news and sa TikTok siya nagte-trending. This lady right here, I believe she's just 16, 17, basta a teenager, college student. They are a lot of students kasi are like gathering protesting in Myanmar now kasi they're like wanting the release of Aung San Suu Kyi. So nagrarally sila. This is what happened with Philippines during the time of Cory Aquino. So a lot of people go out for revolution, di ba? It's a revolution one. So naka-yellow yung mga tao noon. There are like nuns and priests in the street fighting for our rights. Kaso during that time, the Filipino soldiers are not killing their fellow Filipino. So parang nandun lang sila show of force. Pero here in Myanmar, they're really shooting. And then this woman right here, this is actually one of the last footage of her. Kasi di nasa unahan siya ng protesting. And then when the military started to shoot fire, this is the last video of her seen that she's alive. Kasi after this moment, she was actually shot dead. And as young as she is, teenager lang, she got killed fighting for the freedom of Myanmar. Kaya they're actually saying, we are watching history right this very moment. History to. Pagtanda nyo, how old are you now? 13, 12 years old. Pagtanda nyo, give it when you're 30 years old, 35 years old. Your children will ask you, asan ka, mami, daddy, nung nangyari yun sa Myanmar. Kaya dapat nanonood kayo ng balita ngayon. Kasi so many things are happening in 2020 and 2021. You don't want to be clueless. You are living in a historical portion of mankind. Historical portion to. Kaya dapat yung mata nyo bukas. You should be aware of what's happening with your surroundings now. Okay? So what happened with her? They project somehow that this woman right here would be a symbol of freedom in Myanmar soon. Sometime in the future, her story will never be forgotten because she's just teenager and she fought in front of the protesters fighting for their freedom. Okay, kasi they don't want military rule. Okay. So there's also another movement. You see, they use this is actually a symbol of Cory Aquino during its revolution. Eh. So Aung San Suu Kyi faces or parang was created to be like in a face mask like that. Is it face mask? So parang like a mask like that. It's a mask like that. And then you see, ang cringy kaya when you're watching it, like when people gather that many and then all of them are wearing the face of Aung San Suu Kyi and then they're doing that symbol of democracy. It's like like chilling, especially if you're like a, a nationalist or a person living in Myanmar. Nakakilabot yan. It's just like we are not living on that age already. Parang this portion right here, nangyari sa Philippines, but way back, Cory Aquino time. Okay, it's just like now, we are in the part of history. Uy, less than 1 minute na lang. Let's renew a new video for this.